Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming today. This class is part of a monthly series in which we discuss how to apply fundamental Buddhist principles to our daily lives. So before we begin, let's take a moment to set our compassionate intention. It's very important to always start every activity with an intention of what we're trying to accomplish. And so remembering that all sentient beings have at one time or another been our kind mothers. We are here practicing the Dharma and learning about the Dharma so that we may benefit them and bring an end to their suffering. So let's take a moment to just set that intention. So the first teaching that the Buddha gave after he attained enlightenment was the Four Noble Truths. And who's familiar with the Four Noble Truths? Okay, a few hands. So the first noble truth is the truth of suffering. The Buddha said, this is the noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering. Death is suffering. Birth is suffering. Decay is suffering. Disease is suffering. Death is suffering. To be united with the unpleasant is suffering. To be separated from the pleasant is suffering. Not to get what we desire is suffering. The second noble truth is the truth of the cause of suffering. And the Buddha taught that our suffering is caused by desire and ignorance. So ignorance means not seeing the world as it actually is. And without real insight into the nature of reality, we interact with the world in destructive ways. We relate to the world with anger and greed and jealousy and desire because we don't understand what the world is actually made of, how the world actually works. So we relate to it in ways that don't help us and don't help anyone else. And when we desire something, even if we get it, we're never truly satisfied. Our satisfaction is short-lived, and as soon as we're done with one thing, we have another desire to chase, and we're constantly chasing after something and never actually being satisfied by what we're chasing. And when we desire things to be other than they are, we are suffering. So the Buddha also had good news. The third noble truth is that there is an end to suffering. And the fourth noble truth is that the path to the end of suffering is called the Eightfold Path. And by following that path, which is a code of conduct to live ethically with our body, speech, and mind, by following that path, we can reach the end of suffering just as the Buddha did. So today we're going to be focusing on that second truth, the truth of the cause of suffering. Many people believe that the cause of their suffering is external. It's, maybe your parents were mean to you and that's why you're suffering. Or maybe you got some really bad news and that's why you're suffering. Or the grocery store is out of dark chocolate and that's why you're suffering. Similarly, many people believe that the cure for their suffering is external, that the cure lies with God or the Buddha out there, and it's somewhere external to you. But the Buddha taught that this isn't the case. The Buddha taught that both the cause and the remedy for suffering are within our own minds. So Chagdud Rinpoche says that if we want to understand how suffering arises, we can just practice watching our minds. This is a science experiment that we can do ourselves. So if we just let our minds relax, not thinking of the past and future, not thinking of hope or fear, but just being in the present moment and letting our minds rest comfortably, open, and natural, just as they are, we can see that in the space of mind, there's no problem, there's no suffering. But then something catches your attention. It might be an image or a sound or a smell or a great idea or a memory, but something catches your attention. And your mind splits then into inner and outer, subject and object. And in simply perceiving that object, there's no problem. But once you zero in on it and you start noticing things about it. You start seeing whether it's big or small, or black or white, or beautiful or ugly. And then that is when the problem starts, because you make a judgment. You say, do I like it or do I not like it? And if you decide you like it or you don't like it, that's what starts causing a problem. If you think I like it, that leads to I want it. And if you think I don't like it, that leads to I don't want it. And if we like something and we want it and we can't have it, we suffer. If we like something and we get it and we lose it, we suffer. If we don't want something but we can't stay away from it, we suffer. So our suffering seems to occur because of the object of our desire or aversion. But it's not really so. It happens because our mind splits into this object-subject duality and becomes involved in wanting or not wanting something. We spend our whole lives reacting in this way, wanting things, not wanting things. And Jetsunma says, as sentient beings, we have this mistaken idea that we can satisfy ourselves through very gross materialistic means. And we can't even see through the falsity of that idea. We can't really understand how it is that we're fooling ourselves, that we're duping ourselves. And we never seem to understand why, in the end, we are never completely satisfied, do we? We never really understand what has fallen through, why it is that we're never happy, and why it is that we're never completely satisfied. Or if we are happy, why does it not last? Why is that so? We all have this idea that by satisfying our desires, we will be happy. We know if we want something we don't get it, we'll suffer, and so we think, well, if I get it, then I won't suffer. I'll have it. I'll have the thing I want. But it doesn't work out, does it? If satisfaction was to be found in material objects, well, we've all got plenty of material objects, so we would be happy by now. If satisfaction was found in relationships or objects or anything of this world, we spend our whole lives wanting and getting those, but clearly we're not happy yet. So the satisfaction does not lie in those external things. And it's never just one thing that we want. We don't just want one thing. One thing leads to another, and another, and another, and another. So let's say, for instance, that you're eating some food. So you might eat something really rich and meaty, and then afterwards you want something light and sparkly to cleanse your palate. And then maybe you eat something rich and spicy, and so afterwards you want something mellow and sweet to tone it down and balance it. Or if you eat something salty, you want something cool and refreshing. And if you have something cool and refreshing, you want something salty. And so you always want another thing. You always have to constantly build on what you've given yourself to complete the experience. And it just goes on and on and on and on. It's an endless cycle of things that you have to do, one on top of the other, this cycle of reactivity, of just another want, another want, another want. So let's say you go to the store and you see a dress that you absolutely must have. And you tried it on, and it fits you perfectly. If you're a man, I don't know what guys buy, I guess shirts or shoes or shirts, suits, I don't know. So let's say you have a shirt that you bought and you really want it, it fits you perfectly. So I'm going to keep going with the dress though, because it's a little bit more up my alley. So let's say you buy this dress and if you love this dress and it fits you perfectly, well, now you have to have the perfect shoes, right? And if you bought closed-toed shoes, you might need stockings or socks to go with them. If you bought open-toed shoes, well, then your toenails are going to show, and you might need to get a pedicure before you go out because your toenails have to look perfect with your perfect shoes and your perfect dress, and you're going to have to do your hair just perfect too, which means you might need some products. And then there's accessories. You definitely need earrings with this dress, and of course, the only earrings that are going to match this dress just perfectly, they cost like $150. So that's just unreasonable. You can't possibly spend $150 on a pair of earrings for one dress. You have to buy another dress They have to go with at least 2 dresses. So you go searching for the next dress. But maybe that really still isn't practical, 2 dresses. So that top and that skirt, that would make the earrings practical, right? But that skirt would need brown shoes, you bought black shoes, you're going to need to have another pair of shoes. Like, it just keeps going. It just keeps going, and you need another thing and another thing and another thing. And it gets awfully complicated very, very quickly. So if you watch this pattern, you'll find that it never ends. Because every time you put a piece together, there has to be another piece and another piece. Relationships are the same way. You might think, if I can just find the perfect relationship, I'd be happy. And then you find a relationship and you talk yourself into believing that it's perfect. And maybe it seems perfect at first, but one day you notice there's a flaw, and that's a really, really bad day, because all of a sudden there's a flaw, and you don't want to think about it, and you try putting it out of your mind, and you try to pretend like you didn't see it, but you can't unsee it. And so now you know this isn't perfect. And at that point, you thought you were up, you were up on top of the world, you're so happy, you've got the perfect relationship, you're set for life, but it's not perfect, and so you just fall apart, because now you have to find something else perfect now. This isn't going to fulfill your desires permanently. So very diligently, you set out on the hunt again, looking for something else, looking. Maybe you ditch that relationship and you want a new one, or maybe you just start looking for other ways to make that relationship fulfill you. But you go on the hunt again. You have to find something else to satisfy your desire for happiness. And it can happen with material objects, relationships, ways that you spend your day, jobs, ideas. We hunt after these things, we search for them, and we think that they will fulfill us, and then they're flawed, and they don't. There's no perfect relationship. There's no perfect job. There's no perfect idea. And so we're never completely content. So this insatiability of our desire habit reminds me of a book that I grew up with. Has anyone ever read the book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie? Yeah. So for those of you that haven't read this book, it basically goes something like this. There's a mouse, and the mouse wants a cookie. So it says, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk. But if you give him the milk, then he'll want to see his milk mustache, and so he'll ask for a mirror. And then, so you give him the mirror, and he goes and looks in the mirror, and he notices that his whiskers are getting long. So he asks for some scissors to trim his whiskers. If you give him the scissors, he'll trim his whiskers, and he'll get fur all over your bathroom, and he'll ask for a broom to clean up the mess. Well, if you give him the broom, that leads to another thing, leads to another thing, leads to another thing, and eventually he's hungry, and he asks for a cookie. Well, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. And so, and it just starts all over again. So and that's just like how we are. That's how we are. It's always leads to something else that you want. Whenever we get a new object, we get really excited about it, and we become attached to it. And we think, this is going to be the thing that makes me happy. This is it. I got it. And it isn't. Or we get a new relationship, and we become all enamored, and we think, this one is going to make the difference. This is going to make the difference in my life. But it doesn't. Even if he is the one, or she is the one, it still doesn't actually change your life as much as you think it's going to. It doesn't make you permanently happy. So what we're seeing there when this happens, when we find something that makes us happy and then at a certain point it doesn't, what we're seeing there is the fault of cyclic existence. So the Buddha taught that what begins must end. What goes up must come down. What causes us to be elated must also cause disappointment. What comes together must result in separation. And this is the fault of cyclic existence. This is its quality. So we're seeing the qualities of cyclic existence there. This is the nature of how the world works. What comes together must fall apart. But more than that, we are seeing the reflection of our own mind. Our own mind has within it the karma, or the cause and effect situation. We've set ourselves up with a cause and effect scenario within our own mind to be able to experience this kind of thing again and again and again. And that's our habitual tendency. The Jetsunma says that we are suffering from a kind of inflammation of the mind. She says, interestingly, the very thing that causes us to be inflamed by some new toy, some new relationship, some new thing that comes into our life, some new event, some new job, some new spiritual path, some new idea that comes into our mind and causes us to be breathlessly excited and feel like everything's going to be different now. That quality of inflammation is the same quality that will actually lead to the downfall of that particular circumstance to satisfy us. Because that very inflammation is an indication of the instability of our minds. So what is it that we are so inflamed with? According to the Buddhist teachings, what our minds are inflamed with is desire. I want this and I'm going to have it. I'm going to get it. I want it. And a mind captivated by craving like that has no clue what pain or pleasure are. When we desire something, do we experience pain or bliss? When you're in the moment of desire, when you want something, if you think about something right now that you really want so bad, is that an experience of pain or bliss? Are you in control? Do you feel at ease? Are you relaxed? Or do you feel restless? Do you feel stressed? Do you feel worried? Do you feel insecure and desperate? So in this bewildered state, intoxicated by desire, we actually can't tell the difference between pain and pleasure, love and desire, happiness and sorrow. And our craving minds can mistake anything for pleasure, even pain. It's like an addiction. And we can see this very obviously when someone has an addiction. Of course, we don't want to think of ourselves as addicts, but we can see this very easily when we look at someone that has like a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction or a gambling addiction. They don't experience much pleasure. They're always restless and distracted, and they're searching for a fix, and then maybe when they get their fix, they get a moment's peace. But then as soon as that goes, what are they doing? They're thinking of the next fix, and where are they going to get their next fix? And the longer it takes them to get to that next fix, the more restless and worried and stressed they are about getting to that next fix. The Jetsunma says, the excitement you feel when you've got that dress and those shoes and those stockings and those $150 earrings, all of it together, that same excitement is the inflammation that you feel when you've got the dress, but you haven't got the shoes yet, and you want them so bad you can taste them. It's the same thing. It's an inflammation. It's like a fever. And no one can ever be happy, no matter what, while they've got that fever in their minds. Because it isn't the satisfaction of the fever that composes happiness. So the excitement that we feel when we get what we want is the same inflammation that we feel when we're still chasing after what we want. It's the same inflammation in our mind. And even though we think that if we satisfy that desire, if we satisfy that fever, that we'll be happy, in fact, in cyclic existence, the satisfaction of that fever doesn't exist. Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche says, temporal pleasure is samsara's dangling carrot, but lasting happiness, this is samsara's impossible promise. So you really can't satisfy that fever. And the reason why is that the fever itself is the problem. anything you do to satisfy the fever only makes the fever stronger. So if this was a physical fever, with a physical fever, if it doesn't kill you, then your immune system responds, you rally a defense, and the fever naturally comes to an end. The fever is actually helping you take care of an illness, and so it comes to an end. But this kind of fever, the fever of desire, that is not naturally going to come to an end. The Buddha taught that cyclic existence will not naturally cure itself. We have to actually take steps to cure it and to cure the inflammation of our own mind. So why is that? Why doesn't it naturally end? Especially if everything is impermanent, why doesn't this just naturally come to an end? Jetsunma says, because in cyclic existence, we're busy buying those shoes and those earrings. We're busy finding the first perfect relationship and convincing ourselves that it's going to work, or ditching it and finding another one when it doesn't. We're busy suffering the disappointment of watching things that have come together fall apart. We're busy going through what we have always gone through, the ups and downs of cyclic existence, just the cycle of death and rebirth, up and down, happy and sad, high and low, hot and cold. We're busy doing that. And every single time we hit a certain point, whether it be high or low, at that point we are creating more cause and effect relationships and more habitual tendencies within our own mind. So it can't come to a natural end because we're constantly pushing that ball forward. We're constantly giving it more and more momentum with just every moment, the way we interact with the world. Seeing something, I like it, I don't like it, I want it, I don't want it. Seeing something, I like it, I don't like it, I want it, I don't want it. And just every time we're doing that, we are reinforcing this habitual pattern that keeps that cycle moving forward. So let's say we buy that dress. Let's say we want the dress so bad and we buy the dress. And now we want the shoes so bad that we can taste them. We have this one object and we have to have its complement. There's no satisfaction in this scenario. Why not? We got the one thing that we desire. Why don't we have any satisfaction from that? We need its complement. And Jetsunma says, in getting the object in the first place, in getting that dress, we've reinforced an old and very bad habit of ours. We saw something, we accepted it at face value, we took a lot of energy to secure that thing, we grasped at it and we got it. We strengthened that habitual tendency. And then, of course, what was the result of that? The result was that you had to have more, because that habitual tendency has been strengthened. So now that that habitual tendency has been strengthened, now we really, really have to have the shoes. Now we really, really have no willpower. So we save up lots of money. We buy this great pair of shoes. They're really expensive and they're really beautiful and they go perfectly with this dress. Well, guess what? Now we have further substantiated, further reinforced the cause and effect relationships within our minds that cause us to look at things on a superficial level and reach out and grasp for them. And this habit continues the inflammation of desire. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche says, when we crave beautiful forms, we become like moths, which are attracted to light and get burnt by flames. However much enjoyment we may derive from the pleasures of the senses, there will never come a time when we have had enough. The more we indulge in them, the more they become like honey smeared on a razor, cutting our tongues as we try to lick it off. Ouch. Think of that the next time you buy shoes. There's no point at which our desires will be satisfied. Even if you manage to get everything you can think of, the habit of desire and inflammation will still be there in your mind. And what's going to result from that? You'll just think of more stuff to want. We're endlessly creative. We will definitely think of more things to want. I've been going for 30 years thinking of something new to want all the time. Like, I don't know how long you've all been alive, but I'm pretty sure you've been going that strong this whole time. So, we're just going to keep thinking of more stuff. I think there's stuff I want now I never knew I would want. And so now I'm sure in 10 years I'm going to want stuff I can't even dream of now. We'll continue to just invent things to want. So if you've got all the clothes you need, maybe you'll shop for shoes. And then maybe you've gotten all the shoes you need. So maybe then you need to reorganize your closet. So you need to go buy some organizational storage stuff to organize your closet. And then you do that, and then maybe you want to redecorate your apartment or your house. And then maybe you'll need plants for the landscaping outside. And then maybe you need to, it just keeps going and going and going. So where is the end of it? Where does that end? If we can never satisfy our desires by fulfilling our desires, where does it end? Jetsunma says that it ends when you begin to practice stabilizing the mind. The Buddha taught that the cause of all suffering is desire. So how do you get rid of desire? Everyone has desire. We all desire to be alive. We all desire to be happy. The Buddhist taught that every sentient being desires to be happy. That's something that we all share. And we're all doing it in different ways, but we all wish to be happy, and we are inflamed with that desire. So how do we actually reduce that inflammation? Jetsunma says that we have to step off the merry-go-round, that cycle of wanting and reacting and not wanting and reacting. It just makes us want and fulfill and want and keep trying to fulfill. If we step off that merry-go-round, then we can start moving towards actual happiness. So to step off of that merry-go-round, the first thing we have to do is look at the faults of cyclic existence and really look at them square on and face a very sad fact, which is that no matter what we accumulate during the course of our lives, we can't take anything with us. We can't take a grain of sand with us when we die. We can't take anything. We can't take our relationships with us. We can't take all of our objects with us. We can't take our ideas or even our emotions with us. The one and only thing that we will take with us is the condition of our mind streams. That is, our own habitual tendencies. So if we have the habit of grasping, that's the habit that we're going to take with us when we die and into the next rebirth. If we have the habit of anger, we're going to take that with us. If we have the habit of greed or ignorance, whatever that habit is, that's what you're going to take with you. So we often think that the only way to create happiness is to control these outer circumstances of our lives, to get everything we want and to get rid of everything that bothers us. But the real problem is our reaction to those circumstances. It's not the outer circumstances that we need to change, but our own minds and the way that it experiences reality. So our emotions propel us from extreme to extreme, from happiness to sadness, from elation to depression, back and forth, constantly swinging back and forth, this big emotional pendulum. Chagdud Rinpoche says, emotionality is the byproduct of hope and fear, attachment and aversion. We have hope because we're attached to something that we want. We have fear because we're averse to something that we don't want. As we follow our emotions, reacting to our experiences, we create karma, a perpetual motion that inevitably determines our future. We need to stop the extreme swings of the emotional pendulum so that we can find a place of centeredness. So that means we have to get off the merry-go-round and stop reacting to the world in this way that we're habitually trained to, and learn some new habits so that we can take those habits with us when we die and into our next rebirth. So there are a few antidotes to the way, there's a few antidotes to this habit of our mind, a few antidotes to desire. And there's a number of them. We're going to go over 3 main ones today, 3 options for you to try the next time you find yourself in a fit of shoe shopping. So the first antidote is impermanence. When we first begin to work with the emotions, we apply the principle of diamond cutting diamond. So, only a diamond can cut another diamond, right? So similarly, an effective way that we can change our thoughts is to use thoughts to change thoughts. So an angry thought can be antidoted by a compassionate thought. And similarly, desire can be antidoted by the contemplation of impermanence. So first we begin by examining what it is that we're attached to. To go back to the dress analogy again, let's say that you bought the dress and it's fabulous and it makes you happy. But then you gain weight and the dress doesn't fit you anymore. And now when you see the dress in your closet, it makes you upset because it reminds you that you're not the same size as you used to be. And now you're sad. You spent all this money on this dress and you're not that size anymore. And now this dress that once made you happy, now it causes you sadness or self-loathing when you look at it. But the dress isn't the source of your suffering, and your weight isn't the source of your suffering either. It's your attachment to each of those that's causing you to suffer. Another example is, let's say you work very hard to become wealthy, and you think that this will bring you happiness. You'll be able to get anything you want with all this money. But then, I don't know, you lose it in the stock market, or someone steals all your money. So now you're broke. And you might feel like you're really suffering from that loss of wealth. But it's not the loss of the wealth that makes you suffer. It's your attachment to the wealth that made you suffer. So we can lessen that attachment by contemplating impermanence. We know that whatever we're attached to will change or will be lost. This is the nature of impermanence. Everything in this world, everything that we perceive is impermanent. It changes. The people we love may leave or die. The people who are our friends today could become our enemies in the future. We might lose our life savings in a stock market crash. Even our body. We're so attached to our bodies, and even our body will be gone one day. We won't even have our name, our body, all of these things that make us who we are. We're going to lose all of that when we die. There isn't a grain of it that we can bring with us. So knowing this not only helps to reduce our attachment, but it helps us to better appreciate what we have when we have it. There's nothing wrong with having money, for instance. Nothing wrong with having money. But if we're attached to it, we'll suffer when we lose it. Instead of being attached to it, we can appreciate it while we have it. We can enjoy it. We can enjoy sharing it with others. And at the same time, we can know that it's impermanent. And then when we lose it, our emotional pendulum won't swing so wildly. So have any of you ever played peekaboo with a baby before? Yeah? So when babies are about 4 to 7 months old, they develop something called a sense of object permanence, which is they start to understand that objects still exist even if they move out of view. So once they understand this, you can play peekaboo with them, and then, when you go like this, they'll laugh, and peekaboo, and they laugh when you disappear and reappear, because they're in on the joke. They understand that you're still there, and you're just hiding and reappearing, and so they're in on the joke, and so they laugh. But if you play this with a baby who's younger than 4 months old, they might cry, because they haven't understood this yet. And so when you cover up your face, they actually think that you've disappeared. They think that they've been abandoned and that you're gone, because they haven't learned this sense yet. They haven't learned that objects are still there even if you can't see them. So as soon as you go out of sight, they freak out and they really think that you've disappeared. So we have the opposite issue. We have to work on developing our sense of object impermanence so that we don't freak out when it goes away. So then we'll be in on the joke, and we won't be so upset when things disappear on us. It's like if you can imagine a child and an adult building a sandcastle on the beach. You know, the adult has never taken the sandcastle to be permanent, so they aren't attached to it. When a wave comes up and ruins the sandcastle, or some kids come by and kick the sandcastle down, the adult isn't bothered by it. The adult was never attached to the sandcastle. But the kid is very upset. They had started to think of the sandcastle as real. They were thinking about who was going to move into it, you know, what kind of furniture they were going to put in it. This sandcastle was real, and then it's gone, and that's very, very upsetting. So just like that child, we've pretended for so long that our experience is stable and reliable. And we've grown so attached to it, and we suffer when it changes. But if we maintain an awareness of impermanence, understanding that this is just one big sandcastle of samsara, then we'll never be completely fooled by the phenomenon of samsara, and we won't be surprised, and we won't be so upset when things change on us or when they end. So that's the first antidote that we can practice, as we can practice contemplating impermanence. The second antidote that we can practice is the practice of exchanging self for others. So Chagdud Tulku Rinpoche says that we are afflicted by what he calls me, my, mine-itis, which is a condition caused by ignorance. Our self-centeredness and our self-importance have become very strong habits. And in order to change them, we need to refocus or redirect that habit. And so instead of concerning ourselves with I all the time, we can expand that focus and redirect our attention to you or them or others. Reducing self-importance lessens the attachment that stems from it. So when we focus outside ourselves, we ultimately realize the equality of ourselves and all other beings. Everybody wants happiness, not just us. Everybody wants happiness. No one wants to suffer. So we can take our attachment to our own happiness and expand it to an attachment to the happiness of all. Chagdud Tulku Rinpoche says, until now, our desires have tended to be very short-term, superficial, and selfish. If we are going to wish for something, let it be nothing less than complete enlightenment for all beings. That is something worthy of desire. Continually reminding ourselves of what is truly worth wanting is an important element of spiritual practice. So we won't change our desire and attachment overnight. We've been practicing those for way too long. That won't change overnight. But our desire will become less ordinary as we start redirecting it, redirecting our worldly cravings toward the aspiration to help all beings find unchanging happiness. Jetsunma says, according to the Buddha, what produces happiness is liberation. What produces happiness is inner peace. What produces happiness is relief from grasping. What produces happiness is the pacification of desire, the pacification of hatred, the pacification of ignorance. That is what produces happiness. So how can we give that happiness to sentient beings? We can't buy that happiness for them. We can't, instead of buying dark chocolate for ourselves, just buy dark chocolate for the whole world. It's not going. It's okay. Maybe it's an idea. We could start there. Shanideva says, all the joy of the world comes from wishing happiness for others. So where we can start is we can start by making wishing prayers. We can make prayers that all beings be free of suffering. We can pray that all sentient beings be, may they be free of the suffering of desire. May all beings be free of poverty in all its forms, whether physical poverty or spiritual poverty. May the desires of all beings be satisfied. May no being ever want for anything. We can start with making wishing prayers like that. And we can also do that in the moment that we are feeling desire. When you really want those shoes, maybe you can think to yourself, no, wait a second, I'm not the only person in the world that wants shoes. May all beings have shoes on their feet to protect their feet. May all of the children walking barefoot in Bangladesh, may they have shoes on their feet. And when you're looking for clothes, you think may all beings have clothes. And when you're craving your dark chocolate or your LaCroix, you can think may all beings have food and drink to eat. And so you can kind of catch it in the moment, catch that desire in the moment and turn it around and turn your focus from yourself towards others and the happiness of others. Jetsunma says that making wishing prayers antidotes that horrible habitual tendency of grasping that we have, that very habitual tendency that makes us so unhappy and makes it impossible for us to ever have what we need, because what we need is peace. The end of suffering is not something you can buy, but you can practice it in a gentle, loving way. Just by starting to make wishing prayers like that and contemplating impermanence, you can gently and lovingly start moving away from that habit of desire that keeps us unhappy and start moving towards a direction that actually does lead toward happiness. When you first start making wishing prayers, you may feel tremendous joy. It might be a great relief to start thinking of someone other than yourself. And you might feel like, wow, I've never thought so much about others. This is great. Or you may feel like you're faking it. And you may feel like you're not really kind like that. And so you're just lying to yourself, and you don't really wish these things for others. So what do you do on the days when you feel like you're faking it? What do you do when you're feeling not so kind and you don't really give a rat's tuchus about what others want? And for some people, that's every day. For some people, they really don't, they don't ever want to think about others. So the reason why you feel like that is because you don't yet have the habit of generosity. It's not like some people are kind and some people aren't. And some people are selfish and some people aren't. And that's just the way it is. You're either a kind person or a selfish person. It's not like that. We all have the exact same potential. We just have developed different habits. So some people have really cultivated the habit of generosity, and some people maybe didn't know any better and instead cultivated a very strong habit of self-cherishing. And that's okay. We can start wherever we are, and we can create new habits. So you're still going to have days when you can't think of anyone else's suffering but your own, and that's okay. You just make wishing prayers anyway, even if you don't feel like it. Even if you have to grit your teeth while you wish for someone else's happiness, you just try it anyways. And Jetsunma says it isn't actually necessary for you to feel the joy of the moment. It's only necessary for you to practice. And if you practice, eventually you will create the habit of generosity, and then you will feel joy through that practice. So we've got the antidote of contemplating impermanence, and we have the antidote of exchanging self for others, expanding our focus to, instead of thinking of our own wants and needs, starting to think of other beings' wants and needs. The third antidote that we're going to try is shamatha meditation. So as Jetsunma said, the inflammation of desire is an indication of the instability of our minds. And so the next technique we're going to try is something that helps to stabilize our minds. It's a type of meditation that helps to stabilize our minds. And that moment that we were talking about when you notice an object and then you react to the object. And that's when the suffering starts. This helps to pacify that reactivity. So you don't have to react every time. You start learning not to just react and follow that habitual grasping impulse. So all we're going to do for this is watch our breath. And I'll give a little bit of instruction to this, but first, does anyone have a timer that they could offer, like an iPhone or something? And can you set a 5-minute timer for when we start? Thank you. So this meditation helps to calm the reactivity. It helps to create space in our minds. So what we're going to do is just sit comfortably with your back straight. You can place your hands in your lap, just gently relaxed. And in our tradition, we meditate with the eyes open. You can just angle them slightly down. You can kind of go like this with your hand, and where your pinky finger is, that's about the place that you want to look at. And your ego is going to try to distract you during this meditation. It's going to try to come up with things that will take your thoughts down the road. So remember that your meditation is not lost by hearing your thoughts, but by following them down the road. So when you find yourself following a thought, just drop it. Don't look at it to see if it's a good thought or a bad thought. It doesn't matter. Just drop the thought and return to your breath. And just put a very light attention on your breathing. Don't try to control it all. Just breathe naturally and put the most gossamer thin attention on your breath, like there's a little feather gently riding on the surface of your breath. So we'll meditate for 5 minutes. Did you notice your mind trying to distract you? And do you notice judgments as soon as a thought came up? And then you'd start, something would try to catch your attention, and then you judge it, and then you're gone down the road with it. Just paying attention to that pattern is really helpful to start overcoming our habitual tendency of desire. So I hope that you'll try these different antidotes to desire. The antidote of contemplating impermanence, exchanging self for others, and then practicing stabilizing your mind. So that's it for today. We're going to end with a short dedication.
Someone's dedication.
Mm-hmm.
So in this...
Is it in these?
Let me see where it is in here.
Yeah.
We'll put the questions on the mic.
Okay.
Yes.
Just one brief question that probably, what if your mind is really, really loud?
Really, really loud?
Yeah, when you start trying to do Shine, especially in a group, and it's like, okay, I didn't expect screaming.
Practicing the stabilizing the mind practice, definitely at first your thoughts will try to bug you as much as possible, and it's kind of like they're yelling at you like, mom, 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 and then you have to become like a really good mom who totally learns to drown out the sound of that and stops reacting. But I think it just takes a lot of practice of doing that, and eventually your ego is very, very wily and will try to find everything it can do to distract you. And then if thinking of this thing doesn't work, it'll try to make you think of this thing, and it'll try and find where it is that you can be pulled away from your meditation. And so I think it just mostly requires diligence and just keeping trying and being gentle with yourself. And the teachers always recommend also keeping our practice sessions short and sweet. And so then even if you're having trouble, not forcing yourself to stay at it for hours and hours and hours because you haven't hit that one experience of meditative stability yet. Like, give yourself a break. You try it, and then just come back and try it again. And you just have to keep coming back and trying it again. By this effort, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished, and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms.
Thank you, Atira.
Thank you.